There's been a lot of trust that is eroded with academic researchers and academics across much of culture today. You're going to feel, you see a lot of people that are pushing back against academic culture. And I'm going to be the first one to say that I actually think it's our own fault as academics because of the culture that is underlying it. And just stick with me before you get too upset on either side. So I grew up in a very blue-collar family. My dad worked at the same pulp and paper mill for 46 years. My mom stayed at home and raised us 5 kids. And working in academics was like not a thing in our family. It wasn't necessarily a big thing for all of us to do, the sort of success thing. My dad actually took pride in the fact that he sort of stayed in the same job. This was a really important thing for him in terms of family stability and making sure that we had a very strong family unit. And then when I got into the research game, now I'm a professor, and I do a lot of research. And when I got into this, I was initially curious. That's the only reason why I wanted to get into the research game, was because I was just curious. I was interested in how the world actually worked, which is very different from when you actually get into it and the norms begin to change. What happens is that there's this sort of stress on performance when you are in the academic game. And the only thing that actually matters is publications, by the way. And so what this does, this stress on performance and doing spectacularly well and publishing X number of different publications, what this does is it creates a culture where you don't want to interact with the rest of the world. You think that the way that you get ahead in life is that you just write more papers. And so you become more isolated and you don't interact with the general public. And so there's this very strong norm where academics and researchers feel that they should not interact with the general public because it's going to erode at their abilities of becoming successful within playing the particular game that they're in. Now this creates a tension where there's less and less representation in society of people doing these particular roles, and so people don't resonate with who they are. They don't understand who they actually are. They don't see themselves in these particular individuals because they look so different from the people that are around them in the general public. And it almost becomes, in a kind of weird way, it becomes very elitist because of the fact that people are focused on doing research so much, and that's the only thing that actually matters. And it creates this very strong culture that if you're not doing research, then you're somehow inferior, you're somehow a problem in the system. Now, what this does in the general public, it creates this sort of problem with representation or belongingness, where people just don't see you and what you actually do and what's the normal life that you actually live. So I think the way that we get around this, right, there's this weird tension that's going on right now where people don't see themselves in this particular world, because I've lived in both worlds and I feel like I don't belong in any world, is that we have to live more of a normal life. We have to encourage people to do normal things, to relate to normal people, like go to parent-teacher interviews, go and do charitable work, which is all considered a waste when people, it's strange, but it is true. You're wasting your time if you're doing charitable work, or you're going to spend time with family and friends to go fishing on a Sunday, for example. All of this is a really peculiar sort of artifact that is eroded from this, because you're supposed to be working all of the time. You're supposed to be doing research all of the time. So I think that the way that we get around this is that we have to become more relatable to more people. We have to be much more democratic air quotes, to normal people, where we just see each other in it. And that means having people that are just not academics in the sense of it. When you get a PhD, that you go and do other things and encourage people to do other things, to go be leaders of different organizations around the world, or just raising your family. All of those things are ultimately really good for society, to encourage people to interact and know that it's not a big scary thing, that you just studied a little bit about a particular topic. And yes, you do know a fair bit about that topic, but I'm going to tell you this right now, is that the world is so unbelievably complex that even when you know most of the stuff about a particular topic, that you still don't know hardly anything about that particular topic. So one thing that you will learn when you actually start doing research is that the world is very complicated and you don't really know that much. You're explaining only a little tiny bit. But that's where we have to change the culture. That's where we have to encourage people to go do normal things where people see you and are part of the fabric, quote unquote, the fabric of society, where people just see you out and about doing normal things that are less scary to everybody. I think that's ultimately the problem that we face, and it's the problem that I face too. I struggle with this because when you read things and you learn things, you see the world in a different way. And so there's this tension that I constantly face, where I'm constantly thinking about how do I relate this information that I've learned that is maybe different than what everybody else thinks, without sounding pretentious and sounding like an asshole. Ultimately, I hold back on a lot of things because I don't want to be that person. But at the same time, we need to be more relatable with the world around us. I struggle with that every day. It's something I very, very much struggle with, is how do I actually do that? And I don't know what the answer is, other than pushing back against the urge for perfection, to work all of the time, to be highly successful and regarded in your field. Pushing back against that, I think, is an extraordinarily important task that we all have to face, because that's the only way that we become relatable to the general public. That's the way we are going to change the norms, where education, doing research, all those kind of things become interesting again, where other people see that you're doing these things, and that is totally fine to do those particular things. It's the battle we face, how to become relatable, but at the same time, try to figure out the world and look at it and know that you know something a little bit more than everybody else. And it's the one battle that when you go through and you do this, you will face this battle repeatedly. How do you study the world and understand it, but then relate to normal people without sounding like an asshole? That's the challenge that we all face. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.